Hello, welcome to part 2. Today we are going to discuss about reign of terror, did women have a revolution, the abolition of slavery, the revolution in everyday life. In part 1 we discussed France become a constitutional monarchy. Even though the situation in France continued to be tense during the following years because Louis XVI entered into secret negotiations with the King of Prussia and Austria to send troops to put down the events that had been taking place in France. Before this could happen, the National Assembly declared war against Prussia and Austria in April 1792. The French army sang Marseillaise, song composed by the poet Robert d'Isle. The Revolutionary Wars again brought losses and economic difficulties to the people. While the men were away fighting at the front, women were left to cope with the task of earning a living and looking after their families. Large sections of population were convinced that the revolution had to be carried further as the Constitution of 1791 gave political rights only to the richer section of society. Political clubs become an important rallying point for people who wished to discuss government policies. The most successful of these clubs was the Jacobins under the leadership of Maximilien Robespierre, which got its name from the former convent of Saint Jacob in Paris. On 10 August 1792, the Jacobins stormed the palace of Tuileries, massacred the king's guards, and held the king himself as hostage and later imprisoned by assembly. In the following election, all men 21 years above, regardless of wealth, got the vote. The Jacobins under Robespierre won elections. On 21st September 1792, Assembly abolished the monarchy and declared France a republic under Robespierre and renamed Assembly as Convention. On 21st January 1793, Louis XVI was guillotined publicly at the Place de la Concorde on the charge of treason. The Queen Marie Antoinette met with the same fate shortly after. Robespierre's government issued laws placing a maximum ceiling on wages and ration meat. Peasants were forced to transport their grain to the cities and sell it at prices fixed by the government. Expensive white flour was banned and all citizens were required to eat bread made of whole wheat. Equality was also sought to be practiced through forms of speech and address. Instead of traditional sir and madam, all French men and women were henceforth citoyen and citoyenne. Churches were shut down and their buildings converted into barracks or offices. The period from 1793 to 1794 is referred to as Reign of Terror. Do you know why? Ex-nobles and clergy, members of other political parties, even members of his own party who did not agree with Robespierre's methods were arrested, imprisoned, and then tried by a revolutionary tribunal. If found guilty, were guillotined. It. Robespierre pursued his policies so relentlessly that even his supporters began to demand modernization. Finally, Robespierre was convicted by a court in July 1794, arrested, and on next day sent to the guillotine. The fall of the Jacobin government allowed the wealthier middle class to seize power. A new constitution was introduced which denied the vote to non-proprietor sections of society. It provided for two elected legislative councils. These then appointed a directory and executive made up of 5 members. This was meant as a safeguard against the concentration of power in one-man executive as under the Jacobins. However, the directors often clashed with the legislative councils, who then sought to dismiss them. The political instability of the directory paved the way for the rise of military Dictator Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte. In 1804, Napoleon Bonaparte crowned himself Emperor of France. He set out to conquer neighboring European countries. Initially, many saw Napoleon as a liberator who would bring freedom for the people, but soon the Napoleon armies came to be viewed everywhere as an invading force. Finally, Napoleon was defeated at Waterloo in 1814. Napoleon saw his role as a modernizer of Europe. He introduced many laws such as protection of private property and uniform system of weights and measures. Many of Napoleon's revolutionary ideas of liberty and modern laws made a lasting impact in Europe. The slave trade began in the 17th century. French merchants sailed from the ports of Bordeaux or Nantes to the African coast where they bought slaves from local chieftains. In Caribbean, they were sold to plantation owners. Throughout the 18th century, there was little criticism of slavery in France. The National Assembly held long debates it, but it did not pass any laws. Fearing opposition from businessmen whose incomes depended on slave trade. In 1794, Jacobin regime abolished slavery in the French colonies. Again in 1804, Napoleon reintroduced it. Slavery was finally abolished in French colonies in 1848. Role of women in French society. From the very beginning, women were active participants in revolution. In order to discuss and voice their interests, women started their own 60 political clubs and newspapers. From the very beginning, they demanded the right to vote, to be elected to the assembly, and to hold political offices. During Jacobin regime, the government made schooling compulsory for all girls. Their fathers could no longer force them into marriage against their will. Divorce was made legal. It was finally in 1946 that women in France won the right to vote. Abolition of censorship. One important law that came into effect soon after the storming of the Bastille in the summer of 1789 was the abolition of censorship. In the old regime, all written material and cultural activities, books, newspapers, plays could be published or performed only after they had been approved by the censors of the king. Now, the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen proclaimed freedom of speech and expression to be a natural right. Let's take a short recap. The ideas of liberty, democratic rights were the most important legacy of the French Revolution. These ideas spread from France to the rest of Europe during the 19th century, where feudal systems were abolished. Even these ideas influenced people that colonized India. Tipu Sultan and Ram Mohan Roy were influenced by the ideas coming from revolutionary France. Thank you.